This video is brought to you by The Ridge, bringing you the simplest and best quality wallet out there. With over 50,000 5-star reviews, many people have been enjoying the Ridge wallet, where it's able to hold up to 12 cards plus extra room for cash, while the wallet itself being like a third or even a fourth of the size of your traditional wallet. I mean, look at the difference here. My wallet's a little bit on the bulkier side, and you could definitely see the size difference here, and they both have almost the exact same room for cash and cards. Not only that, the Ridge is also giving you their key case, which is a perfect case to hold your keys, compressing them in tight so they don't go anywhere, they're not flinging around and all that stuff. You can precisely bring out the key that you want for the job. And I'm so happy with the wallet and key case because it doesn't look like I'm holding some big wad in my pocket. And I hold a bunch of keys and sometimes it gets really hard. The Ridge has the best offer for you, where right now you can save up to 40% through December 22nd by clicking the link in the description below or going to ridge.com/weasel. Remember, that's ridge.com/weasel for 40% off. I'm telling you guys, you do not want to miss this deal. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson put on one of the best performances of his career, in fact one of the best traditional martial artist striking performances in the UFC at the age of 39 years old. That is something I thought I would never say before. Going into the fight, I did believe that Wonderboy might be a bit too old to hang with some of the younger talent of the UFC right now, but he not only showed to be capable of defeating them, but looking at him alone, his skills, his speed, he does seem as good as ever before. He was able to outspeed someone who was 9 years younger than him, vintage traps on his opponent to fall into, and counter everything they did. His pull counters specifically were on point, just like they were against Tyron Woodley back in the day, Johnny Hendricks, etc. The chambering of the lead leg when he's in the southpaw stance, so it's the right leg chamber, so he's lifting it up before he kicks out there, just like a traditional karate fighter would do. It was super tough for Kevin Holland to know exactly what Wonderboy was throwing. A traditional martial artist sidekick, so like Taekwondo fighters, karate fighters, etc., their sidekicks are some of the most confusing to gauge and defend because all their kicks are looking the same from that lead leg. They're throwing their round kicks, their hook kicks, their side kicks, all with the same kind of chamber. The only time you can really tell what they're throwing at you is after halfway through the kick. The first half of the kick is the chamber up, and that is the same with all of Wonderboy's lead kicks. The only thing that you can really tell now is the second half where he's extending it with a round, thrusting it forward with the side, or hooking around with his hook kick. And most of the time, the last half of that kick is way too fast to react to. And you saw that over and over again against Kevin Holland. And it's not only with Kevin Holland, it would be against almost anybody Wonderboy will ever fight. You'll need another traditional martial artist to understand what kicks he's throwing, maybe someone like Anthony Pettis, who's a black belt in Taekwondo, to be able to gauge some of these kicks and counter them effectively. Guys like Kevin Holland and most of the other welterweights don't have that kind of background to understand it. This is why Stephen Thompson was able to land the hook kicks without Kevin Holland even knowing that they were coming. Look at the reaction from Kevin Holland once Wonderboy throws the hook kick. His reaction was completely off. He brought his hands together on the center, but the kick is coming around. Look at when he attacks the body with the side kick or attacks the head with the side kick. The body side kick, the only thing that Kevin Holland tried to do against any kind of chamber was to lift his knee upward, so it creates a center block. And sometimes that would actually help against the body side kick, which you know for sure Kevin Holland was drilling in training camp. He knows that if he sees the chamber, that most likely Wonderboy is going to throw a side kick straight. But what happens when he throws it to the head? What is his reaction to that? There is none. Kevin Holland had to do a lot of guessing whenever Wonderboy attacked with his lead leg. And you saw this specifically like when Wonderboy would throw the side kick to the face, Kevin Holland blocked the right side of his head like a hook kick was going to come. When Wonderboy threw the hook kick, Kevin Holland thought it was going to be a side kick to the center. He was guessing all the time. He didn't really know what was coming at him. Rarely he would guess correctly and he would block like a round kick, but most of the time he would guess incorrectly and get caught by the kick. Wonderboy Thompson may have the best lead leg action out of any fighter ever in UFC history, and he fought the majority of this fight in the southpaw stance, so you know that was always there for him because Kevin Holland rarely switched stances, so it allowed Wonderboy to stay in southpaw, not only to use his lead leg as an offensive and defensive tool, and I'll talk about the defense in a bit, but also it allowed him to line up a lot of left straights, and that came as a counter as well. Wonderboy was using a defensive sidekick for a couple different reasons. One of them, not as important, he only did it once in the fight, but it's very effective. It's actually something I've talked about plenty of times before. Using the sidekick as a counter against someone's leg kicks that are attacking your side kicking leg. So in this case, Wonderboy's lead leg, which is his right, if Kevin Holland's looking to kick it, Wonderboy can just lift it upward above the kick, and Wonderboy hits into the body with the side kick. This is an amazing defensive weapon that I believe one day will become much more of the norm, as you're kind of accomplishing two things at once. You're not getting hit by the opponent's leg kick, and number two, you're landing your own attack as well. You can also knock them off balance because when they're throwing the leg kick, they're on one foot. And the other more important thing that Wonderboy was using his defensive side kick for was in the beginning of the fight, but he went away from that. It was almost like an instinct of his, like a natural action that he will take whenever the opponent gets too aggressive on him. Kevin Holland was like leaping in there with knee entries and also lead leg kicks. Because of how much Kevin Holland was jumping in there, Wonderboy was trying to intercept him and push him away with the sidekick. But this is oftentimes actually not working for Wonderboy because that knee that Kevin Holland's coming in there with is guarding the center line. So it's going to cause Wonderboy's sidekick to deflect off the knee and pass Kevin Holland. You could see how dangerous this could be for Wonderboy, because as soon as his sidekick misses and glances away, Kevin Holland has an opening to connect him with a right hand. This is actually very similar to the reason why Wonderboy got knocked out by Pettis. His sidekick miss glanced off, and he was open for a headshot. This is the same thing that can happen here with Kevin Holland, but Holland didn't really have the same kind of precision that Anthony Pettis had. This was happening a few times until Wonderboy quickly adjusted. After the second time this happened, Wonderboy stopped throwing the sidekick as a defensive weapon, and instead, knowing that Kevin Holland is jumping in there and lifting his knee upward, he knows by doing that, Holland is going to keep himself, place himself on the center line, and he cannot move his head. And with the knee coming upward, it's also causing Holland to be narrow stanced. So what's the opening here? Line up the left straight. That's really it. Wonderboy was just intercepting him with a left straight down the center as Kevin Holland is jumping rapidly into that punch. Thankfully for Kevin Holland, he has an iron chin, so he can take these kind of punches and not get knocked out. Most fighters would have gotten hurt badly by Wonderboy in that first round because it kept happening. So Holland himself now has to make an adjustment, and he made a very intelligent adjustment that unfortunately, and honestly was very frustrating, he stopped going to. He only landed it twice in the fight, and both times he landed it, it was very effective. He was landing the low side kick to the knee. One time it landed to the thigh, but the other time it landed to the knee. And if you remember, Darren Till injured Wonderboy with this technique. And the reason why it works on Wonderboy, the master of side kicks, is because of his stance. And also, he's not too used to opponents kicking his legs. That comes from his traditional martial arts background where you're not allowed to kick him in the legs. That's not part of the rules. His stance is so sideways and his legs are so wide out there, you could really just tag the knee over and over again with that side kick, and he's not really doing much against it. Darren Till literally injured Wonderboy in the fight doing that, and Kevin Holland threw it twice. Both times it worked, and then he just stopped. It was such an effective technique for him to use. He should have went to that over and over again throughout the whole fight instead of leaping in there with punches. Kevin Holland's kicks actually were very effective in the fight, but he was just going to his hands a lot more. And it showed what a lot of the criticism against Holland was in the fight. Lack of fight IQ. And not only came with him standing up and not grappling with Wonderboy when he literally got top position, good positions on Wonderboy, stood up and just got away from it. He wanted it to be a striking match. He wanted to go toe-to-toe on the feet with one of the best kickboxers to ever do it in MMA. Number two, he also let go of a lot of good clinching positions that he had. He has good clinch positions on Wonderboy. He'll land a few shots here and there, and then he just like, I don't know if it's ego or pride or whatever it is, lets go, gets away from Wonderboy, doesn't really resist any defense. And now we got this one. And this came from the strikes. The low side kicks, he just stopped going to them. And we know that Wonderboy hates that technique. He despises the low side kick more than anything else. He actually said the technique should be banned from the sport. So what I'm thinking here is Kevin Holland did everything to make the fight more comfortable for Wonderboy. He didn't wrestle or grapple until the fourth round after his hand was broken and his corner was telling him to do so. He didn't really want to get into many clinch positions, and he stopped throwing the low side kick. He literally wanted to participate in Wonderboy's kind of fight the whole way through until the fourth round. And yes, it makes it for a fun, entertaining fight, but to analyze it honestly, it does show a lack of IQ in here, or a lack of careness, because Kevin Holland had a real good chance if he went to all these different kind of techniques that Wonderboy despises. Why make the fight super clean for Wonderboy's style instead of fighting your own fight? You're fighting Wonderboy's fight. And oftentimes when you saw Kevin Holland extending with his punches from long range, Wonderboy was doing a very good job on pulling on the punches and showing his speed advantage in the fight. It came defensively especially, where he was like just moving away from shots, pulling at the correct positions, and even countering and making Kevin Holland pay for many of his overly aggressive attacks. And we do absolutely have to talk about the punches from Kevin Holland. The majority of his success actually came off of his jab. His jab set up everything for him. He has an 81-inch reach. And Wonderboy said at the end of the fight that the reach was the main thing that he was worried about, or something he was more focused on than anything else Kevin Holland presented. He put a lot of his focus on trying to get around that reach. And he was having a bit of an issue up until like midway throughout the third round of getting past the jab specifically. The jab was landing whenever Kevin Holland wanted to throw it, whether by itself, tagging Wonderboy at the end of it. You could definitely see the extension on that jab, and when Holland wanted to set it up for his right hand. That was actually the only way he even landed his right hand in the fight, was off of his jab. It was simple. But many times throughout the fight, he was swinging big haymakers, and you can see the difference here of how Wonderboy reacts from the jab straight combo compared to Kevin Holland's hook straight combo. The jab straight is there to land. Wonderboy doesn't really have a good reaction to this. But now look when Holland throws the left hook instead. Wonderboy easily sees it coming and able to pull away from it. And because he pulls away from that, he knows the right hand's coming right afterward. The left hook not only is a bigger punch to hit with, but it also creates a bigger overextension. So ultimately, throwing a left hook like this is going to make your right hand afterward even slower to connect to the target. And going up against someone like Wonderboy, who's that much faster than you already, you're going to need to do everything that you can to either have the correct timing to connect on him, or match the speed enough where he's not going to be able to evade it in time. And Holland wasn't necessarily doing that for most of his punches. In fact, his biggest punch in that first round that he hurt Wonderboy with was off the jab straight combo. And Wonderboy made the mistake of trying to pull on the jab because he wasn't really used to actually seeing it from Kevin Holland at this point. Pull on the jab and counter with his own right hand. So that pull counter he was tagging him for the whole fight, he tried to do it against the jab, and that's a no-no. Especially against someone who's much longer than you. That jab was not to hurt him. That jab was a setup. So committing so much to counter someone's setup like this while they have a right hand coming at your head, that is definitely going to land on you. And this is the punch that Kevin Holland said broke his hand. And I can absolutely see why. I could definitely agree. It lands toward the top of the forehead, almost like the left corner of Wonderboy's crown. This is one of the hardest parts of the head, and usually you're taught that if you hit this spot, you could easily break your hand, especially if you don't have boxing gloves. Now, we don't know for a fact, but I could definitely see how this punch actually caused the break. And then over and over again, you start to see that Kevin Holland was blocking the kicks with his right hand. Wonderboy was throwing kicks with his left leg, and when you keep blocking the kicks with your right hand without using your other to cushion the blow, the necessary way you want to block a round kick is have your right hand up to take the impact, and then your other hand to push it away, cushion the blow so you don't take really any kind of impact through it. Kevin Holland wasn't doing that for the majority of the kicks, and he was taking the full impact on his hand. This could have also furthered the damage to his hand, to the point where you were actually able to see how ballooned up it was, how swollen it actually was. And even Wonderboy was kind of shocked of how it looked, man. This is also where it comes down to precision, where you throw your punches and all of that. Wonderboy never really attacked Kevin Holland's forehead like that. He was always landing to the jaw. When he was countering with the left straight as Holland was being overly aggressive, look where all those left hands were landing. When Wonderboy was in the orthodox stance to blitz at Kevin Holland, showing his major speed advantage, he was connecting right to the jaw. Every single time. He wasn't really missing target on the harder parts of the head, he was hitting the softer parts of the head. And Kevin Holland was still durable enough, still has such an iron chin to take every single shot. And those blitzes from Wonderboy were super alarming of how fast he was. It was a simple 1-2 combo, usually the one was just a fake, and Holland was barely able to react. The speed that Wonderboy is operating on, even at 39 years old, is insane. And really at this point, just put him up against strikers, because we don't want to see him going up against wrestlers and not show this kind of speed and striking skill. Not only was there precision with Wonderboy's punches, but even his kicks. For an example, when he landed that big body kick in the fourth round that hurt Holland, notice the way he threw it actually. He gave a big telegraph. And he did it on purpose. Usually you see fighters give a little telegraph just so they can mask up the kick more and make it unnoticeable. Wonderboy did it the opposite way for a different reason. He actually gave a big telegraph, swung his arms and everything, cocked his leg back, loaded up his hips, all of it, just to make it seem like he was going to go to the head or something. Holland actually defended up high, thinking that the kick was actually coming to his head. So the telegraph before he threw the kick was massive, but the kick itself didn't have a wide angle. It wasn't coming up high. It didn't have like some big motion to it. The telegraph was bigger than the kick itself. And he landed precisely under the arm, right to the body, and crushed that liver, man. Holland had to shoot in the takedown afterward to find a moment of rest. This is what I'm talking about. When you've been striking at highest level for that long, you're able to find these placements for your shots that many other fighters are never going to be able to do consistently. And Wonderboy's also the kind of guy to throw spinning kicks in close range. He's the only fighter that would do that. He's literally in punching range and doesn't even take a back step to create distance. He throws a spinning hook kick from there. We are talking about a different level of striker. Not only that, all of his spins were something that Kevin Holland was not reacting well to. He was blocking with one hand and stuff like that and getting crushed. You were seeing like the spirit leave his body with every single spin kick, and Holland just had to recuperate quickly before he really gets hurt. You saw that a few times with these spin kicks from Wonderboy. Tremendous amount of power, man. And also note that Wonderboy is a bit smaller than Kevin Holland, and he was still able to hurt him with so many of these shots. And then there was that left hook. Just pure power from Wonderboy intercepting Kevin Holland's right movement, landing it right past the guard. Technically, it's not a knockdown, but Kevin Holland came very close to falling on the ground from the punch itself. He went in for a takedown and improvised in the moment, but notice before he attempts the takedown, he literally folds down almost on his knees. That was probably the biggest punch that Kevin Holland has ever taken in his entire career. He's never been knocked down from a punch before, and this one came the closest to doing it. And we'll look at some of the other moments of the fight here, really emphasizing Wonderboy's even subtle striking skills, like him so quickly parrying the jab and landing his counter leg kick, also the able to move away from Kevin Holland afterward, or like where Wonderboy using his movement to square up Kevin Holland for his attack. So Wonderboy is actually on the defensive here. He's moving away from Holland, and he gets into a squared stance where he's shuffling right and left. So he goes to the right, and Holland follows that movement, gets him pretty close, and Wonderboy immediately bounces the other way to his left. Now look at both of their stances because of this. Wonderboy got into his sideways stance, whereas Holland is squared. Because Holland tried to cut off that angle, hopping to that side, he's now in a squared stance, and Wonderboy takes advantage, stepping on the outside foot and lining up his left straight. Your parallel stance, your squared stance, is very bad for defense. And off of the left straight, Wonderboy was able to move away on that outside again, getting away from the aggression completely. This here was a good example showing the difference in footwork between the two. Then we go to 1 minute and 37 seconds of the third round. Remember that Wonderboy was getting used to the jab midway throughout that third round, and this is when he starts to show it. Kevin Holland throws a jab and Wonderboy slips on the inside of it. And notice he's in orthodox now. Usually when Wonderboy's in orthodox, he puts more emphasis on his hands than his kicks. More specifically, trying to land his right hand on the opponent. So by slipping on the inside, he makes the decision on angling out to his left side as far as possible to create the necessary angle to square up Kevin Holland again. The more Wonderboy moves to his left, the more he faces a squared Holland, where his legs will be parallel, but in order to get that angle, he throws in a left hook, which is going to take some power off of the blow. If you're moving to your left while throwing your left hook, it's going to decrease the power of it because you're not creating momentum into the punch, right? You're actually moving away from the punch when you're throwing it, but all it's doing is to set up that angle, and now he has it. Look how much more on his left angle he is compared to when the exchange started. And now notice Kevin Holland's stance. He's squared again. He's parallel. And it's not because of Kevin Holland, it's because of Wonderboy. Wonderboy caused it to happen. So he's able to land another right straight on Kevin Holland, sending him backwards. This was a big punch. Now Wonderboy shows a bit more of his boxing skill a little bit later in the third round, 1 minute and 3 seconds. He actually pulls on the jab, which is something a lot of fighters aren't doing, pulling on someone who has a 6-inch reach advantage on you. But he does it, and he doesn't try to counter immediately afterward. Remember before in the first round, when Wonderboy wanted to pull on the jab and counter with his right hand, and because of that he actually got hurt by Kevin Holland's right? That was the punch that caused Holland to break his hand. Wonderboy learned 2 rounds later to not do that again. So he pulls on the jab and waits for Holland's next attack. Holland throws another jab, and Wonderboy actually ducks and moves inward. He gets right into Kevin Holland, pounces upward with the left hook, and connects with a right straight as Holland is looking to slap him, I guess. Straight beats looping, regardless of what you're throwing looping. And then finally, we have to look at something from Kevin Holland that he was able to do. I was very impressed with him. His side kicks are actually pretty nice. So what he does is, he throws a lead leg kick, and Wonderboy attempts to check it, but doesn't get there in time due to how sideways his stance naturally is. It's going to take him a little bit longer to check a kick from that stance. So then Holland brings his leg upward again, and Wonderboy thought it was going to be another leg kick, and he moves away when he sees that the leg kick wasn't coming, and Holland was able to connect him to the face with a side kick, and Wonderboy acknowledges it. He's like, okay, I see. And ultimately, that's the end of the breakdown, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This one did take a little bit more time to do. A lot happened in the fight, and it is one of the best fights of the year for sure. And I do like Wonderboy's call out of Nick Diaz before the fight, or he can have a rematch with Jorge Masvidal. Give him a striker. I don't want to see Wonderboy going up against wrestlers and grapplers anymore. I know that he wants a title shot still, but he is also calling out for strikers, so let's give him someone like that. But the issue with Wonderboy right now is he's fought the majority of the strikers in the division. What other striker has he not fought? Besides Leon Edwards, he's fought Jeff Neal, he's fought Vicente Luque, he's fought Jorge Masvidal. Maybe you could do him and Michel Pereira. That's like the only other striker he hasn't fought yet. Everybody else will wrestle and grapple him. So either do Nick Diaz if that guy still wants to fight, or they could do a rematch with Jorge. And as for Kevin Holland, I don't really know at the moment. I don't know if he should stay at welterweight. I don't know if he's going to go up to middleweight. I don't necessarily know what he exactly wants right now, because the guy already contemplated retirement before, and I don't know if that's going to be still on the table for him. But I hope a good fight comes up for both of them, and I'll see you guys in the next video.